Today on the Garage Gym Experiment podcast, I have Pete Holman. He is a veteran in the industry. He's created quite a few products, a few that are now under well-known brands. I had him on the podcast actually in November of 2022. So it's been a few years. I believe in that podcast you were talking about, or you started to discuss this new product that you are working on. And it must have taken a little bit of time to come to fruition because here we are. We're going to talk about it here in a little bit. But for anyone unfamiliar with who you are, can you just give like maybe a few minute summary of your background, and explain some of the products you've invented, and then we can dive into the new product. And then also, while I have you, I'll pick your brain on a few things at the end.
You got it. Excited to be here, Jake. Thanks again for having me. So my name's Pete Holman. I'm a physical therapist. I've got a master's of science degree in physical therapy, and that's really how I got started in the industry. I'm also a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the NSCA. So I've been a strength coach. To be honest, I really got in the industry because I got into martial arts very late in my athletic career. I always wanted to be a professional athlete and just couldn't find my sport. I did soccer. I grew up in Colorado. I did big mountain skiing, and I wanted to be an extreme ski racer and a technical ski racer. And then I got into basketball, baseball, and football and lacrosse, and I just did everything. And I just didn't quite have it in high school. I couldn't figure out my sport. And after high school, I was working at a health club, and there was a martial arts class there, a taekwondo class. And so I would mop the racquetball court across. I was a maintenance guy at this club, and so I'd mop the racket. And then 5 years later, I was actually the team captain at the World Championships in St. Petersburg, Russia. So my background is really in martial arts, physical therapy, strength and conditioning. And then later in my career, I got into fitness product innovation. I just would see things in my clinic up in Aspen, Colorado, where I was practicing, that I would get frustrated with. And I said, man, there's got to be a better way to organize all this functional training stuff. So I created something called the Functional Training Rack. It was like a medicine ball rack on steroids. And I licensed that to perform better. And then I was training a snowmobile racer at the X Games. And he was having low back pain, and he was having a hard time engaging his core. I created something called the Core 10 Trainer, which turned into the Ripcore FX, which I licensed to TRX. It became known as the TRX Rip Trainer, and now it's licensed to Golf Forever. It's called the Golf Forever Swing Trainer, and it's very simple, Jake. It's a bar with a sport cord on one side, but there's a lot of education that goes into this, and it's one of the best rotational training tools on the planet, in my opinion. I was doing a hip thrust with a client in Aspen. This was a few years later, and they were having pain in their shoulders as they were on the hip thrust machine. So I put an Airx foam pad behind their shoulders as they did a hip thrust. If you don't know what a hip thrust is, it's basically a glute bridge, but your back's elevated. And there can be a lot of pressure on your shoulder blades. And so as I sat at a profile angle from my client doing a hip thrust, and I noticed this Airx pad kind of articulating like a fulcrum, I said, man, there should be a bench that, helps you with this hip hinge pattern. And I created something called the Glute Drive, and I ended up licensing that to Nautilus. And now it's the Nautilus Glute Drive. It's a plate-loaded hip thrust machine. I think it's the #1 selling strength piece of equipment they have in their line. This is Nautilus, mind you. So I don't know how that happened, but now we're in Istanbul, Turkey, and Auckland, New Zealand, and Belgrade, Serbia, and Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Podunk, Iowa. We're all over the world with this glute drive, and that's taken off really well. I also did something called a loaded carry. It's basically a wheelbarrow. I grew up on a farm in Colorado, and I attribute all my core strength and my grip strength, which really is functional strength. If you look at your core and your grip, if you're weak in those two areas, you're not going to deadlift. You're not going to be able to do pull-ups. You're not going to be able to do Olympic. You can't do anything if you don't have grip and core. And so this wheelbarrow, I didn't even lift weights when I was a kid. I just was hauling road base and concrete and railroad ties around all day long, working on this farm. And the next thing you know, when I started to strength train, people around me were like, dude, you've only been training for 3 months? How are you doing, 12 pull-ups? It's insane. And it was my grip. And so I created something called the Escape Barrel. I licensed it to Escape, and it's a sled, push-pull sled machine, but you can also wheel it around like a wheelbarrow to work on your grip strength. And then the one that you talked about that I've been in process of working on for 5 years now. I can't believe it's finally launched. If you ever want to get into product innovation, look me up and I'll convince you to run for the hills. But anyhow, it is fun. It's addicting. It can be very challenging. And this last one was very challenging because I went through COVID. This factory shut down. I ran out of money. Everything's very expensive. The patent took me like 3.5 years. Normally a patent's, 18, 20 months, maybe 24 months. This was a 3-year patent process with revisions and addendums and money. But anyhow, I finally launched the Glute slide, and hopefully we'll talk about that today. And that's my latest product. So really, really proud and excited about that. But that's kind of who I am and what I do. And now I'm full-time product innovation.
Awesome. Can you share which one's the best for you? Or which one's been the most successful?
Well, to be honest, the functional training rack was a flop. Great concept, but I launched it in 2009, and for people that are old enough, in 2009 we went through an economic depression that was unheard of. I mean, I lost a house. I mean, my friends lost apartments. It was just crazy. But on top of that, gas prices went up, oil prices went up, steel. China was building for the Olympics, so they bought all the steel. They were building like at a frenetic pace, and so they purchased all the steel. You couldn't get steel. It was 3 times the cost. And so this was the perfect storm. And so my product, I kind of just gave it to perform better and limped away with my tail between my legs. But I learned some valuable lessons in that. So that was kind of a flop. But the asymmetrical bar training device has been really solid. I mean, like I said, I sold it as the Ripcore FX, I sold it as the TRX Rip Trainer, and now I'm selling it as the Golf Forever Swing Trainer, and we're endorsed by the #1 golfer in the world, Scotty Scheffler. So, and it's such a simple device, That's one thing that I love about your podcast and your sites, your social media channels, is that a lot of your stuff, it's simple, it's smart, it's intelligent, it solves a problem in the industry. So I know there's stuff out there. There's $25,000 treadmills now that you can program up the wazoo, and they're unbelievable. But who's got 25 grand for a treadmill? I mean, literally, even a high-end performance center, you buy 2 or 3 of those, you're done for the year as far as your budget. And so if you can solve a problem, and if it's simple, and if it makes sense, not just intellectually, but like visually, if somebody sees it and goes, within 5 seconds, my social media, my posts get an average of 5 to 7 seconds view time. So it's it puts things in perspective. Like, you better tell your story pretty darn quick. So solve a problem. If it's visual, then it can be effective. The plate-loaded hip thrust machine was another one that's just like, I do hip thrusts. Normally I use a barbell with weights and a bench, and I have to create this whole area in my gym or my home, and I don't have all the space and the gear. And the Nautilus glute drive solved that. Small footprint, plate-loaded hip thrust. You're up off the floor, articulating back pad, which kind of helps with that hip hinging pattern. It makes it comfortable. Not everybody's comfortable hip thrusting. It's, when you start adding weight, it's not a real comfortable practice. And if you're doing it off the floor, there's no range of motion. That's where you get strong. Everybody used to think, this is coming from Brett Contreras, the glute guy himself. He used to think the benefit was at the top range of motion because you got maximal voluntary contraction out of the glutes at the top. Come to find out, the research is showing you get most hypertrophic changes at the bottom where the glutes are stretched. And if you think about, if you've ever done bench press and maybe use dumbbells, and a lot of people kind of cheat and they just do the top range of motion, but hang out down in the bottom range, do some pause reps down there, and hang out with some heavy weight and feel that stretch and see how sore you are the next couple days. Like, that's where you get the maximum benefit, is in the stretch position. And you want strength at end range functionally also if you're an athlete. So anyhow, the hip thrust, the plate loaded hip thrust glute drive, not by Nautilus, has done extremely well. I mean, we sell a few thousand of those a year, and it's a strength piece. And keep in mind, sales cycles for commercial gyms are super slow. It's not like a garage gym. People buy, customers just click and buy. You go to a Equinox, and it's got to go to the general manager, which goes to the advisory board, which and 9 months later they say, yeah, I think we'll buy one. But I'm telling you, Jake, the Glute Slide, which I just launched 3.5 weeks ago, we already have sold them to the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Baltimore Ravens, the CU Buff strength coach just bought 3. He's the basketball coach. Mike Boyle just promoted it. If you're not familiar with Mike Boyle, he's one of the godfathers of functional training and strength and conditioning up in the Northeast. He just endorsed it. Kind of organically. I just sent him one, say, hey, what do you think about this? Next thing I know, he's got a post. We've had 75,000, hits on it, and I'm getting calls from I just got reached out by the Sacramento Kings basketball coach today, strength coach, and he wants to try one. So it's just kind of going nuts because it's simple, it solves a problem, and it's under $1,000. If you can get a solid piece of equipment, whether it's for the home or small gym or boutique, personal training studio or yoga, Pilates studio, for under $1,000, and it's solid and it's well built and it does what it says it's supposed to do, you're onto something. And so I think I'm onto something, and I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. Great to hear. I didn't know it was only 3.5 weeks young.
Yeah. So keep in mind, we've only had stock for 3.5 weeks. And so what happens, once again, not to interrupt you, but when you start producing something, you make a prototype and you test it and you say, oh, we want to tweak something. Well, a little tweak isn't just a little tweak. A little tweak is you have to redo the computer-aided design. You have to then get that checked off by your team. Then you have to send that to your manufacturers. They have to, transcribe it in the Cantonese or whatever language they're speaking. Then they have to produce it. Then they have to ship it over to you. Then you have to test it. And then you say, oh, you didn't quite get it right. And that process just kind of keeps going and going. The next thing you know, the prototype that you thought was so close, was 90% there. That 10% takes another 18 months. It's unbelievable. But sometimes when you wait and you slow cook something, you get a better end result. A lot of people want to rush and they just want to sell. They want to get it out there. They're so excited about their vision. And so I partnered up with these guys from Heavy Metal Barbell out of Owatonna, Minnesota, of all places. And they are phenomenal. These are the best designers and manufacturer liaisons I've ever worked with. But they have an eye for craftsmanship. So I wanted to push it out, and they said, Pete, slow down. We got to wait. We got to fix these handlebars. And then it was the slide platform. We got to fix this. We fixed everything. And now it's just, you get this thing, you put it together, and the process of putting something together is very telling, right? Especially in a garage gym. You get it out of the box, and right away you kind of have it in your hands, and you're like, this is a little flimsy. It looks cheap built. It's not real heavy, and your mind's already going, I don't know, I might return this. Or conversely, you get it in your hands and you go, damn, this is heavy. Oh, these are anodized end caps. Oh, this is slick. Man, this is beefy. And then you put the bolts in, you're like, this is sturdy, this is solid. And then you get on it, and you're still not convinced because you don't know if it works or not. And then you get on it and you put load into it, and you kind of go, oh, this is something I've needed. And so that's what we've got here in the Glute Slide.
Awesome. I saw on the website it's $9.99 right now. You mentioned it's already going into facilities. There were a few things I wanted to mention. So first off, you mentioned the 5-second initial impressions. I'll tell you just from a home gym owner's perspective, I do see potential in the home gym space. I think there is. I recently saw a post, I think on LinkedIn, that was glute training is in for guys. So I saw that, And then also I think about it as like more of like, the early adopters within the home gym space, at least this community right here, are guys, but they're bringing the family in more. So it's definitely something that, more could use both genders, I would say. And then, as you like build out your home gym, you really, you start with all these items that are really versatile, right? You get a power rack, and then you add this, you add that. They're not all like, they're nice. It's great to have the versatility, but you want something standalone. So I do see that trend as more people adding standalone commercial like pieces. It's 100% a trend among like the ones who've been building out a while, and I see that continuing as more people grow their home gyms. We're still pretty young since COVID. And I feel like a lot of people started at COVID, and they're slowly like just building out these home gyms that are just glorious.
Yeah, you touched on so many things right there, Jake. The first thing you said is that guys, for some reason, have shied away from glute training, which is really interesting to me because as a physical therapist, if you come in, let's say you've had a meniscus tear or an ACL rupture or a low back issue or anything going on in your lower extremities, one of the first exercises I prescribe is a single leg glute bridge, assuming there's no pain involved, right? Because you're activating your glutes and your hamstrings and your low back. That's called the posterior kinetic chain. That's critical. I mean, if you want a better squat, you don't think you need a strong posterior chain? If you want a better deadlift, you don't think you need strong glutes? How about an Olympic lift? How about you're doing thrusters or you're an athlete and you're jumping and running and cutting and changing directions? All that stuff starts from the ground up, and your glutes are the powerhouse of your core. One of my best kicks in martial arts was called a spinning back kick. I also did a spinning reverse hook kick to the head. But anyhow, the spin technique does a couple things. Number one is you get this angular momentum. So if you think about swinging a bat, it's kind of this big rotary, inertial thing. But what happens is when you do a spinning back kick, the main driver, your knee and hip is an extension, and then you go into your knee and hip is in flexion, and then you go into rapid extension, right? It's almost like you're jumping up. And so you get this power out of your glutes. And let me tell you, man, that was a knockout blow to the body if you can hit somebody with a spinning back kick, because it's all from the glutes. So the glutes are the powerhouse of your core. And obviously guys should be training the glutes. And then women just love glute training because, you got a wedding coming up, your jeans don't fit, or you want to look good on the beach, it's spring break, whatever it is. Of course you want nice, strong glutes. It's a huge feature to promote not just aesthetically, but functionally. The other thing you said is versatility. And, it's interesting. So this is a standalone piece, so it works the glutes, but the name is deceiving because there's so much stuff you can do on this. It's basically a slide platform, but you can put resistance on the slide with elastic cords. And when you put resistance on there, you can get in a lot of different positions. So you can work your adductors, which is your inner thighs, you're growing. You can work your abductors, which is your outer thigh, your glute medius and glute minimus. You can push back like a donkey kick or like a rear kick back. You can work your glute max, and you can get on the ground and get in a push-up position and do a plank or a pike, which is a core exercise. And the list goes on and on. So although it is standalone, it does add some versatility. But one thing that people don't understand about strength and conditioning is that when you do exercises, you're not doing one. For instance, let's take the chest. You want a strong chest, okay? Every guy does bench press. Great. But almost every guy also does maybe an incline dumbbell press. And then maybe they do a decline press, or maybe they do a cable fly, or maybe they do a dumbbell fly. They're working the chest at different angles and different force vectors and with different loads and different stretch positions. And that's how you get full, well-developed muscles, and that's how you become a functional athlete if you're an athlete. Well, somehow when it comes to the legs, at least, especially guys, they don't think like this. They think, hey, I'm going to do a squat, I'm going to do a deadlift, I'm going to do a clean and press. That's great. That's all sagittally plane dominant exercises. You're doing flexion and extension. Well, guess what? The glutes also work in abduction and adduction. Oh, excuse me, an abduction. They move the leg away from the midline of the body. So if you want strength in your lateral glutes, which are very important stabilizers, you got to do something in the frontal plane of motion. And this glute slide allows you to move in the frontal plane of motion. The only way you can do that is maybe with a cable machine and like a ankle strap. And then you're just kind of like, that's like a aesthetic exercise. But on this machine, there's handlebars, there's a foot wedge you can push into, you can get down low in almost like an ice skater's position and explode out laterally. You want strong explosiveness and strong lateral glutes, you got to do something in the frontal plane. And to my knowledge, this glute slide is the only machine that operates in that plane of motion. And last but not least, guys tend to shy away from elastic resistance. And so I need to set the record straight. Elastic resistance I've used for years as a physical therapist for rehab. And that's what most people think, oh, it's a rehab, there's not enough load. Well, you can make heavier elastic resistance. You can double up or triple up or quadruple. You can add elastic resistance. Well, now all of a sudden you have sufficient tension and external load to create stress on the system. But it allows you to do it in different planes of motion. Weights are loaded axially, meaning from high to low, vertically, right? You do a squat, you're up and down. You do a deadlift, you're up and down. It's free weight. Elastic resistance allows you to work in other dimensions, in the frontal plane, in the transverse plane, which is kind of rotational plane of motion. And so I think it's an amazingly underutilized form of resistance training. It's cheap, it's easy to set up, and it's easy to ship, to be honest. I mean, it's not as expensive. So if you're leery about elastic resistance, give it a chance. Add some heavier loads. They make extra heavy, so even for the upper body, if you've ever done like a heavy bench press, 3 to 5 reps, and then you get off of there and then you do an explosive chest press with cords, and do like 10, 12 reps, your chest is smoked and you're kind of getting that post activation potentiation of activating big, strong muscles and then expressing that into a speed, powerful motion. But the glute slide has elastic resistance, so it offers all this this force development at a higher rate of speed.
Awesome. Within home gyms, a lot of the more popular strength machines are the leg curl, leg extension, and the belt squat. And not all belt squats get that activation. And I feel like this would pair well with any gym that already has those, right? And then also, I'll double you up. How does it compare to like just doing a normal hip thrust?
Yeah, great. So first of all, you mentioned home gyms. Like most home gyms, if you're into glutes, you've got a glute hamstring, right? Or a belt squat, and obviously you've got a rack with either half or full rack with free weights. And so you can do a lot of stuff, maybe a trap bar for deadlift. And again, those are all tremendous exercises. You got to be doing that stuff, but they're all in flexion and extension. And the hips work also in abduction. They move in a different plane of motion. So if you think about an athlete that goes to cut and change directions from left to right, the muscles that are engaged in that movement pattern to a huge extent are the lateral part of the hip, which you don't get by doing squats or deadlift or Olympic lifts, right? Or glute hamstring. So you've got to work in the frontal plane of motion, and there's ways to do that. They used to make, or they still make an ultra slide, which is, you've seen that white board that you put little booties on that are frictionless, and you kind of slide like an ice skater, you slide from left to right. It's actually a really cool machine, and you do that thing for 5-10 minutes. It's a smoke show, but there's a huge learning curve. You got to put these booties on. You don't feel balanced. You're not really working on strength and explode, because you don't have a load. You can't load your system. So, but the concept is really important because it's lateral motion, like an ice skater. And so this glute slide allows you to load in a lateral plane of motion and build that strength. And it's quick, easy setup. It feels stable and solid and bulletproof. And so that's another way to train the glutes in a different plane of motion. And your second question was?
How's it compared to a hip thrust?
Yeah, so a hip thrust is again sagittally plane dominant. You're going from flexion to extension. You can do a similar motion on the glute slide by standing facing away from the slide platform and kicking back like a donkey, like a donkey kick, which is hip extension, glutes and hamstrings. But you're standing, you're in an upright position. So in my line of work, physical therapy and strength and conditioning, you want strength. Strength is a critical component to athleticism and function. However, it's one component. Other components are things like speed and power, balance, mobility. These things you don't necessarily get from traditional strength training alone. You got to have some balance challenges. You got to be in an upright functional position at some point. And the hip thrust is a very comfortable position. You're lying down on the ground or on the glute drive. You're lying on your back. You're locked in there. You just go up and down. It's easy camp-easy. Great way to isolate and strengthen the glutes. Now you've got some firing in there and you've got some strength. Now how do we integrate that into a more functional movement pattern? Well, now you get up on the glute slide and now you're upright and you're in a functional position like an athlete would be. So you got to progressively, overload the system, not just with strength and load, but with movement challenges, with motor control, with balance, with mobility. And that's how not only do you become a better athlete, but just functionally in life, look at the traditional traditional power lifters that have been entrenched in powerlifting. And I'm not bagging on power lifters. I'm just literally talking about factual evidence. When you lift heavy load over and over and over again, and that is your main focus, you end up with a tremendous amount of mechanical loading on your joints. Your shoulder joints, your glenohumeral joints, your hip joints, your lumbar spine. Look at Ronnie Coleman. You end up with a lot of stress and load. And so at some point, does it make sense to work on some mobility, to work on some balance, to work on some coordinative function, some agility? Absolutely. And I think that's what most people want, is they want to age gracefully and have a wonderful life, and they want to hike and bike and explore and adventure in their 70s and 80s. They don't want to be crippled in a wheelchair, at 68 because they've just trashed their joints. So, I like the analogy of, imagine you're a work truck, right? Well, some days you're going to have some hard miles, right? You're going to be uphill with a heavy load, in four-wheel drive. That's a lot of load. But some days you want to be on the highway cruising along it's 65 miles an hour on cruise control. You could put a lot of miles on a truck like that. But if you're constantly driving uphill with a loaded truck and four-wheel drive, it's going to wear out. So
cool. Good info. What about, distribution? How are you distributing? And you've talked on, the benefits of licensing in the past. Is that something you're looking to eventually do? There are a lot of companies that listen to this, so
yeah,
I think that might be a good.
Well, I could write a dissertation, Jake, on licensing versus launching your own product. So this is the first product in a long time that I've launched by myself. And when I say by myself, with my team, Greg and Zach Olson out of Heavy Metal Barbell in Minnesota. And we didn't get investment capital. We funded it ourselves. We're 50-50 partners. We're not looking for licensing. We want to do this on our own. One of the things when you license a product, you basically license over your intellectual property in exchange for royalty. And it sounds good because you think, hey, I'm sitting back on the beach just collecting money, right? And yes, to some extent, that's what happens. But what you don't realize is once you sign that on the dotted line, you give up all control of iterations, innovation, trade show presence, marketing strategies, social media. Like you just sign your life away, and all of a sudden you're kind of in the back seat of a fast moving car, and you have no control over where you're going or what you're doing or how you're getting there. And so it works out sometimes, and and then sometimes it's a frustrating event to endure. So long story short, this latest one, the glute slide, I am in complete control of. My partners and I. We have not elected to license it, so we're distributing it on our own. We have a fulfillment warehouse in Minnesota, which is pretty good. It's centrally, fairly centrally based. These guys are masters at shipping and kitting and fulfilling. We use Shopify, which is a very amazing platform. If you're not familiar with Shopify and you sell something, it's just unbelievable how powerful. You can have a website on there. We've already got international shipping. We've been up and running for 3 weeks, and we've got you can buy internationally. It figures out all the shipping costs and gives you estimates there. Now the challenge is if there's a problem, guess what? It's on you. Whether it's I'll give you one quick example. So we were ready to launch, all excited, and we wanted to have units shipping by the holidays, right? Big, Thanksgiving sales and all this. Hey, you're going to have it by the holidays. Well, guess what? There was a longshore strike in Vancouver, and they went on strike, and our container sat in their port for 3.5, 4 weeks. And guess who did not get their units by Christmas and the holidays? So it was just like I wanted to pull my hair out. And that was all on me. Now we have to do customer service mitigations. We're so sorry. I can't believe this is happening. Here's what's going on. And thanks for your patience. And everybody's pissed off. And now, granted, once they got the glute slide, they're like, oh, it was worth the wait. But, those are the kind of things you have to deal with on your own. And so at this point, because I've been through the process for so long and I have quite a bit of experience, and my team has a tremendous amount of experience, we're really excited about doing this on our own, being the captains of our own ship and controlling the process and controlling the evolution of the product. Like we're adding upper body cords so you can get kind of some reciprocal arm and leg motion going. We're adding what's called an adductor block, which allows you to do resisted adduction. So if you've ever strained your inner thigh or your growing area, those are really important muscles. It's not just about the glutes, it's about your inner thighs. And this machine trains adduction better than anything on the market. And so we're in production of a kind of an add-on piece that allows you to do adduction. And we're even making a kind of this hard foam piece that allows you to do bridging exercises and hamstring curls. So there's devices now on the market that are they have 4 wheels and like a little V wedge, and you can lay on your back and put your heels in that V wedge. I think Sorenex makes one, and you can do a hamstring curl. If you want to load it up, there's a little hook you can add elastic resistance and connect it to the wall or connect it to your cage or something. But the problem is if you have one leg that's stronger than the other, the machine kind of turns and spins, and it's really hard to get it. It just doesn't feel that great. Well, the glute slide, you can do the same exercise. There's no spin, no turn, and we're making but you have to have kind of a pad to lay on that hovers over the machine. So we're already in production on that. So my point is it's really exciting because I control all that stuff. If I had licensed it to Core Health and Fitness or whoever, they may say, oh, that's great, Pete, but we don't think that's a big deal. We don't think adduction is important. Everybody wants to train the glutes. Well, guess what? The Cleveland Cavaliers bought a unit because they can do adduction on it, and they're having a lot of growing issues with their players. If you strain a growing and you're a basketball player, you're in trouble. So they're using it every day for activation and warm-up before they go onto the court to play. And they're doing this adduction move. So it's just exciting to have control and ownership of this product. And that's what I would recommend. If you have intellectual property, if you've got some knowledge, if you've got some mojo, if you have some distribution opportunities, fulfillment warehouse, do it on your own.
Awesome. Good to know. And your comparison to the Sorenex product, I used to have one of those, and it worked great. The issue was what I was trying to, not the issue, but the downfall was like what I was trying to get at with versatility or earlier. Like you have to get it, you have to set it up, you have to put it back, this and that, and then ultimately a lot of people are just deciding, oh, I'd rather just get this piece that stays there. It's easy. It's already ready for me to go. So that's really where I was going with
Got it.
that comment earlier.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how even it's funny. Folks that have a home gym, they're not lazy. I mean, we're one percenters. We're kind of badass ninjas, right? And so you have a home gym, but still, there's something about going through a setup process. I'm trying to think of when I do it. Well, for instance, like if I do trap bar deadlift, you got the trap bar, it's stored vertically. You got the plates, they're over here on the other side of the gym. You know you're going to have to kind of finagle and get it all set up. I mean, come on, that's simple, right, Jake? But in my mind, I'm like, I don't even want to be here training in the first place. And now I got to set up all this junk. Like, I just want to get in there. Like, I got a pull-up bar, and it just stares me in the face. And I say, well, at least I don't have to, I just jump up and grab it and start doing pull-ups. It ain't that hard to get going on it. I got free weights by rep. I just grab them, I start, moving them around. Oh, that ain't too hard. I got the glute slide. I just stand on there and start kicking out sideways and backwards. And so that's a great point. The ease of setup is really important. And I think that's one of the main reasons the glute drive from Nautilus has done so well, because people hate setting all that stuff up. It's just too much time.
Right. Well, it's not even that you're lazy. It's you have 45 minutes to an hour. If it takes 5 minutes to set this up, 5 minutes to set up, you got 15 minutes of setup time, and then you're down to 30 minutes of working out. So people do realize that as they're building out a home gym.
Yeah.
I did meet the heavy metal barbell guys last year. I'd be curious. I thought they were best well known for barbells. They have a really solid reputation of creating made in America barbells.
Yeah.
Are they creating this product, or are they just partners, or
I'll try to tell this quick, but it's a pretty cool story. I met Greg Olson when I launched the Glute Drive at a Nautilus trade show at URSA. It's called URSA. It was back a few years ago, and he had partnered with some other people. Greg Olson was one of the creators of Power Blocks. So if you have a selectorized adjustable dumbbell, home dumbbell, now there's probably 10 different brands. But back in the day, it was Power Block. That's all there was. And then the IP ran out, and now everybody has their own. Rep and Pepin have one, and you could go to Walmart, I bet, and get a Bowflex adjustable dumbbell. But Greg made the first ones, and he worked at Cybex back in the day. He designed Cybex equipment, and he's 65, but the guy, he could kick your head off. He's a taekwondo. Oh, so here's the story. So I met this guy, and he emails me out of the blue, and he says, hey, if you're ever working on some projects, I know you love to invent. We do manufacturing. We're here in the States. I enjoyed meeting you. I'd love to connect. And I just filed it. I said, hey, thanks for reaching out. Nothing ever happened. Well, I go through COVID. I'm kind of losing money. I lost my design team on the glute slide. The Chinese factory shut down. I was pretty dejected about this whole project. And out of the blue, I get this email from Greg Olson. He says, hey, man, just reaching out. It's been a while. Are you working on anything interesting? And I said, as a matter of fact, I am. So we do a Zoom call. And I said, hey, where are you calling from? He says, Minnesota. I said, oh, my gosh, I was born in Minnesota. We got that in common. He says, where were you born? I said, I don't know. I was adopted. He says, I was adopted too. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then so I keep talking to him. This is within like 2 minutes of the conversation. I said, hey, how did you get into this whole thing? He says, well, I was really big into karate. And then that got me into fitness. And then that got me into, manufacturing. And I said, wait a minute. I was on the U.S. National Taekwondo team. And it just was like, and then I said, yeah, so you're just a manufacturer. Have you ever innovated something? He's like, yeah, I created the Power Blocks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just used the Power Blocks at Landau Performance Center. And so within 5 minutes, I'm like, you're my guy.
Holy crap, yeah.
This is my guy. And so I flew out there, and the next thing you know, we were partnered up. They make all kinds of stuff. He makes stuff for Brett Contreras. He makes stuff
Okay.
He's over toes guy. I think that's athletic training gear. They're making some stuff, and he's got three warehouses out in Minnesota, very under the radar, and they have an operation. I mean, it's they're doing 8 figures out of there like nothing, nobody's business. But the most importantly, they're very intelligent. They've got a factory in Xiamen, China. I forget exactly the province, but it's in China. And typically, this is extremely hard to partner up with factories because it's a shady business. I don't know how else to say it. It's extremely shady. It's you just don't know what you're getting, and you can't trust anybody. Well, because Greg brought a bunch of stuff to them, starting with Power Block, he literally helped make this smaller factory and turned it into this behemoth factory. I don't know how many Power Blocks have sold over the last 25 years, but it's significant. And I don't know how much stuff Brett Contreras has sold and knees over toes, but I'm telling you, they're moving product. And so this factory loves Greg and Zach Olson and the heavy metal barbell team. I mean, they send us prototypes. They turn things over. They are on top of it. There's still little issues here and there because it's a different language. There's things that get lost in translation. But so they basically, my team, heavy metal barbell, they design stuff. They're mechanical engineers. They understand fulfillment and kitting and packaging. And they're liaisons to this factory in China that they have a tremendous rapport with. And it's just kind of like the stars have aligned. And then here I am. I'm an innovator. I love to create stuff. I'm curious. I'm passionate. I'm out there. I know a lot of strength coaches. I'm on the trade show circuit and the presenting, internationally. And so I know a lot of context. I do content. And so it's just been this perfect amalgamation of, probably combined 60 years experience doing this stuff.
Good to know. I didn't necessarily know that. So what needs to happen in your mind to make this product a success for you?
I think it's already happening. I think the biggest challenge with a product, first of all, I told you it's got to solve a problem. The second thing, Jake, is it has to be visual. Within 3 to 5 seconds, somebody has to go, oh, I get it right away. Not like an intricate setup and you don't really understand it, and it takes a minute and a half to explain how it functions. The third thing is when you get it, you have to have a visceral feeling and an emotional connection to the product. And, I love, obviously I make my own products, but I use all, I told you I've got a rep. I've got rep stuff. I've got a Rogue assault bike, or Echo bike. I've got a Johnny G Matrix crank set. I've got all kinds of stuff. When I got my Rogue Echo bike, I like Rogue. I like Sornex. I like every rep. I like all these guys. Something about the Rogue Echo bike. I like the look of it. I tried one once at a row house a while back in New York. And I said, this is a good bike. It feels sturdy. It's a little bigger, and I'm a big dude. So I get this bike. I kind of set it up, and I did my first workout, and I had like an emotional reaction to it. I'm like, this is going to help my strength. This is going to help my performance. This is going to help build capacity as an athlete. I like this product. I'm now a Rogue guy. And I don't mean but like I'm down with this bike. I'll scream from the mountaintops, hey, if you get a chance to try this Rogue Echo bike, you might want to do it. It's pretty badass. And so, but the biggest challenge is how do you get that emotive experience without having a client try it? So until we had units to ship out, everybody was like, looks pretty cool. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if I understand it completely. And now they're getting it, and they're getting their clients on it, or they're using it, the glute slide that is, and they kind of go, oh, now I get why Pete Holman and heavy metal barbell are so bullish on this thing. And so it just is a matter of getting them out there, but it doesn't hurt to have them at Division I and professional programs. And then those strength coaches, they all know each other. It's a very intimate, union, and they're going to start talking, and they're going to be like, hey, have you, new stuff doesn't come out much, but have you checked out this glute slide? It might be worth checking it out. They're doing pretty cool stuff. So I think it's just happening, and we're getting the Mike Boyle post. To be honest, we kind of blew up the next day. I think I had 8, 10 sales from that one post, and most importantly, when somebody that's a prominent expert in the industry that's been doing it for 40 years tests something and says, "Hey, I have no affiliation with this product. I just have an affiliation with helping my athletes and my fellow coaches get better, and this product might help you get better today." And so that's kind of what he said, and that's what we need is organic growth. And by the way, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars of digital marketing dollars on campaigns and promotions and this and that and the other. There's nothing like objective third party, experience and people just saying, "Hey, check this out. This is really cool. I like this machine."
Awesome. I mean, that's awesome to hear. That's good. Is that what you expected within the first 3 weeks?
It's funny because I've always been fairly humble. I've always had a high bar. I expect more from myself than most people expect from me, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I have really high expectations, which is a good thing because it's helped me in my career. It's helped me in my athletics. It's helped me really push the envelope. The bad thing is, you walk around with this heavy cloud over your head, and you're constantly self-doubt and critical, and I'm just being transparent now. Like a lot of high achievers and people that are doing cool stuff, whether they're athletes or business entrepreneurs, it's a huge burden. So I knew I had something special, but I just didn't know how hard it was going to be. I know it's hard to articulate something from a social media post. People are like, yeah, whatever. They don't really get it. So I just didn't know if I'd be able to get it into people's hands. But I've built up a lot of contacts over the last 15, 20 years doing this stuff. And I've sent a lot of, by the way, you burn money starting a business. I mean, I've sent out, 10, 12, 14 free units. I haven't made a dime yet. We haven't made a dime. We're not profitable. And so you're just giving stuff away that you spent 5 years creating, kind of crossing your fingers like, I hope this works. But once you send something to somebody and they get on it and they're a reputable strength coach and they kind of go, "Oh, I get it. This is cool. I'll talk about this." That's kind of been my strategy. And, and we do some digital marketing. Obviously, you have to do that to get it out there because a lot of people don't know me from, Adam. I'm just some dude in my garage trying to, create stuff. So, but yeah, here's the other thing, Jake, is I'm very critical of myself and my innovations. So when I start prototyping something, I get on it and test it. And if it doesn't work or doesn't feel like it's supposed to feel, I've even abandoned projects. And I'm like, I'm not. I thought I had an idea. I was all excited. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. Mm-hmm. But then sometimes, the first time I got on the glute slide, it didn't have handlebars. It was a tiny platform. You could barely balance on there. But the second I pushed out against like 4 or 5 cords of resistance and I felt my whole hip engage and light up, I said, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I'm going to keep going on this." And so anytime I'm feeling down or discouraged about one of my products, I put it into my workout. I just did it yesterday. I did not as much glutes on there, but I did core. And by the way, it's very hard to overload your core, progressively overload. I mean, if you're doing sit-ups, you can hold a heavier medicine ball, right? But there's not a lot of machines unless you go to a commercial gym that you can, add selectorized weights to do core. Well, you've got tons of resistance levels, and I'm telling you, you will never max out the resistance doing a plank or a crunch on this thing. So I had like 2 cords on there out of 6, and I mean, you hold at the end range, and you have this progressively difficult exercise as you go into a crunch or a pike. And so anytime I'm feeling doubtful about my stuff, I get on there and go through a workout, and then I smile and go, "Yep, never mind. This is good."
Cool. All right. Lastly, great chat. So much good info. I appreciate your time. Maybe we'll have to do this again later in the year, something like that. That was awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, as we start to get these accessories and stuff, I think it might be cool to talk about how those are being used, or If you ever just want to chat or talk about other equipment, I'm not. The thing that's funny is we all think we're in competition, but we're not. We're all doing the same darn thing. We're trying to help people actualize their human potential, their health, their wellness, their fitness, their vitality, and live a long, prosperous life. And you can't do that without your health and your fitness. And so anytime I meet a fellow inventor or product distributor, I'm like, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. You're sacrificing and trying to help out the greater world good. So get after it, everybody.
Awesome. A lot of product guys will hear this. So thank you for that. And that's going to do it.
Thanks, brother.